Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. No special announcements or anything, so let's jump in and see what's been going on. First up, Crix received his Analogue 3D and immediately posted updates that help with compatibility. No surprise there, Crix is always awesome with this stuff. But the few things to note. First of all, for older non-X series carts, just simply use the latest firmware, version 2.13. For the X series, the latest series that are out for sale, you're going to need to update the firmware and the bootloader. So just update the firmware as normal by copying the files over, drop the bootloader file on, and then access it and run it. But that's kind of the catch, is you need a working N64 in order to do that. I think for the non-X series, all you have to do is load up the firmware, but I don't know if that would need to boot first on an original N64 or not. But either way, if you have access to one, either your own, a friend's, maybe you have local game stores that are nice enough to let you use theirs for something like this, obviously go in and buy something else too at the same time, then this is a super, super easy fix, just as basic as it gets. However, if you don't have access to an original N64, maybe you owned one, but it broke while you were waiting through the many delays for the Analogue 3D or something like that, the other option is to solder a pull-down resistor to one pin in order to make this work. Now, you could either leave the resistor in and leave it on whatever firmware version, or put the resistor in, update it, and then remove it. That's up to you. But I honestly think for most people, this is going to be a non-issue. You just load up on your or a friend's N64, update the firmware and bootloader, and you're done. So thanks very much to Crix to always jumping on this and, fixing analog issues, which definitely shouldn't have been released with these problems. But whatever, Crix got you covered, and it's just a minor bump in the road before you can start using it. An updated version of the canceled N64 game Viewpoint 2064 was recently found and dumped. And there was a previous version that was found a couple of years ago that was very incomplete, but this one looks like it's mostly playable. You can get to some of the boss battles. Hard for Games did a really good video showing the differences between the two versions that were released, showing what the game is like, and it seems like if you're a fan of shooter-style games on the N64, this is a must-try if you have a ROM cart or an emulator or any ability to run it, because it's just like a new N64 game. I don't think it's fully polished. However, the label on it says master version, but somebody on social media was kind enough to point out to me that could also mean that it was one of the masters that would have been submitted for approval, knowing that Nintendo was going to come back and say change this or that. Because I guess a lot of times with stuff like that, even with modern Nintendo stuff, if you know you got a bunch of stuff to fix, but it's mostly buttoned up, submit it, get it approved, or at least wait to see what they have to say about it, and then submit another one. So that's obviously speculation, but that's just an explanation as to why the label might make it seem like it's a completely finished game, and you still might run into some bugs or anything. Also, a patch was just released that translates cinematics and Rumble Pack dialogues into English, which is pretty cool. It doesn't touch anything else about the game, though, which is, I guess, a good thing for now, so you could just kind of play it as is. But yeah, this is neat. I always like found games like this, because even if they're broken and incomplete, it's a cool window into what could have been. And if they're mostly playable, now you just have another free game to play on your N64. So check out the video for all the info on there, and it seems like something I'd want to try out on the Analogue 3D if I ever get time to do a live stream checking mine out. Well, my friends that I'm borrowing until I can do a live stream on it. So I'll get there at some point. Every single person who owns an OSSC Pro should be very excited about what I'm about to talk about. Wobbling Pixels has just released a profile pack for the OSSC Pro and an accompanying video and spreadsheet guide that walks you through how to customize these profiles for you. And there's still a little bit of work to do for your consoles, as with all of these custom profiles, but this will save you a ridiculous amount of time dialing in custom settings and making your games look even better. Now, like I always say with products like the OSSC, the RetroTink products and all of that, if you just want to play your games, your proper procedure is plug everything in, turn it on, start playing. That's all you need to do in order to have a good experience. But if you want to take it to the next level for free, then all you have to do is follow everything that you see in the guide here and follow the spreadsheet pack and tweak your consoles, possibly on a per game basis, depending on what console it is and the resolution and everything. But you can get some pretty cool enhancements just by following these guides. So this is awesome. This is the same type of stuff that we've all been incredibly spoiled with in the retro gaming scene, starting with the Firebrand X profiles on the FrameMeister, and then of course all of the amazing profiles that a bunch of people, including Firebrand X and Wobbling Pixels, contributed to the RetroTink 4K. And it's just awesome to be able to access this level of accuracy by basically clicking a button and in some cases setting phase, and that's really it, because this was a lot of work. Anybody who's been in the scene for a while, especially when I was doing those direct capture videos, knows how much work it takes to dial all of this in and get them into a form where you could just press a button and get a profile. So thank you so much to Wobbling Pixels for doing this. If you're already an OSSC Pro owner, this is a must download. And if you're on the fence about buying one, maybe you felt this one might be the best fit for your needs, links in the description right here. Maybe this is going to be what puts you over the edge. There's a new product out called controller wipes, which are essentially extra large alcohol wipes that are 71% isopropyl that are just meant to disinfect and keep your controllers clean. I bought a box of 50 that came to $30, including shipping to the New York City area, and I just thought it would be something that some people might find helpful, while as other people might, of course, just continue to clean the controllers they have the way they've always cleaned them. So I put out a quick social media video on this and expected to talk for 30 seconds here on the Roundup about it, but it triggered a ton of people. There was a bunch of neutral comments like, cool, not for me, which is totally fine. There's no problem with that, obviously. And there were a bunch of legitimate concerns, which I'll talk about later because I'd love to hear your opinions on it. But wow, a bunch of people just got mad that these exist, and I don't understand it all. So let me walk through what these things are supposed to be for, and hopefully people who got really upset might understand that not every scenario is exactly how their life is lived. But basically, these are individually individually wrapped alcohol wipes that are meant to just be something where you continue to maintain your controllers. They're not for deep cleaning because you obviously still need to disassemble your controller to get into all the nooks and crannies and all of that stuff. However, there are a lot of people that just have sweaty hands, and that's not a fat joke. I know very thin people that sometimes have sweaty hands, and I also know people that, even though they're very clean people, everybody's pH is different, so sometimes controllers under normal use get gunked up with that weird funk. Anybody who's seen those controllers knows exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody who hasn't might think I'm crazy. That's fine. I know it exists. So the whole purpose of this is you take a clean controller, and if you have sweaty hands, you wipe down after whatever, a long session. Or the one purpose that I really thought this would be a great use case for are people who arrive to any kind of fighting game tournaments or anything like that, or video game tournaments, and you're there, you have a couple of these in your pocket, and you're excited, your hands are getting sweaty, you're starting to slip off your controller, so between matches, you wipe it down, and the only concern that I really had is using isopropyl on your hands can dry your hands out too much. However, that might be the perfect scenario for it. So you wipe everything down, you wave your controller in the air like a Polaroid, and the isopropyl evaporates basically instantly, and then you could jump back into your session. I thought that was a really, really great use case for it. Or for the funky controller people. I don't mean to be insulting, but we all know that person, and maybe they should be using it after every gaming session just to make sure that oily funk doesn't build up on things. Now, of course, if you only game at your house, keeping isopropyl and some paper towels handy is totally fine. You're not going to bring a bottle of liquid to a video game tournament around a bunch of expensive equipment, so that's why these might be much better to throw in your pocket. But, do whatever you normally do at home. I don't recommend just wiping it down with a paper towel because you're basically then just grinding in your sweat into the controller. So use something. I've definitely used like all natural cleaners. I don't really like the way they smell. They're not bad, but and I don't think they evaporate nearly as quickly. So I would not do that mid-session. But after I was done gaming, if I was like, I played for a long time, my hands are actually sweaty today, so let me just clean this off real quick so it doesn't get funky. Yeah, fine. So that's basically it. There are people who want individually wrapped wipes. So unlike, butt wipes in your bathroom, if you don't use them fast enough, like in your spare room or something, eventually they dry out. That's probably not going to happen with these, or at least not nearly as quick because they're individually wrapped. People who want to do it on the go, all that other stuff. So yeah, I mean, I just don't understand the hate for it. It makes perfect sense for me that some people would have zero use for it and other people might. But there were some concerns that I wanted to mention because there were things that I'd love to personally know the answers to. Somebody mentioned that the rubber Joy-Con buttons, the sticks on your Switch don't react well to IPA and it kind of wears them out quicker. I had those on my 8-bit Do controller that wore out very quickly without using IPA on them. So I'd love to know if that was a legit thing. Also, some people mentioned that old retro gaming plastics don't react well to a lot of IPA, which kind of makes sense to me. So I'd love to know if anybody has any info on that. I imagine if you used it every single day, yeah, that probably might dry out those plastics. But for the casual user that just wants to keep their old controllers clean, I don't foresee an issue with that, but I'm guessing on that one. So please let me know. But yeah, I would love to hear some more level-headed thoughts about this. And respectfully, no need to be like, not for me. I don't have a problem with those comments, but I want a good conversation because if I am missing something, let me know. I never have a problem being wrong, but I still think these are great for some people in some use cases, and I wanted to share them. Also, while this never, ever, ever affects my decisions, the way I talk about things, or anything else, the creator did reach out to me and offer to send a box for free, and I said no and bought them myself. And there is no affiliate link. I'm not affiliated with the creator. I didn't know who they were until they said, hey, I'm selling these. I think you might find it cool for all your fighting game friends. That has never affected my decision, but I just want to be clear that I'm not selling these. I'm not pushing these. I just want to clarify that they're not a terrible idea. And they're certainly not this horrendous ripoff that some people have accused them of. I think it's totally fine in perfect scenario, in the right scenarios, and not for others. So never expected to talk for 6 minutes about freaking alcohol wipes, but wow, were so many people triggered. So if you can't have a level head about this, I don't know what to tell you, but yeah, I think they're neat and I'm glad they exist. Analogue just released a firmware update for the 3D, the FPGA-based N64 console, and it's a good start, but there's not a lot in there compared to some of the complaints that I had heard about it. It added some stability fixes, some updates to the overclocking modes, and a new option to disable texture filtering. And the installation is about as easy as it gets. You basically just drop it on the SD card, follow the instructions, and it says the update process takes 3 to 6 minutes, which seems like a long time, but whatever. You only have to do it once per firmware update, so not too big of a deal. But I do hope, I know, I'm already laughing as I say this out loud. I do hope Analogue continues to follow up with more firmware updates, which is a ridiculous thing to say. It's like me saying I hope the moon really is made of cheese. But there were some things pointed out where their 100% accuracy thing is not even remotely close to true. And K's at ManuR just posted that there are 15% or more timing inaccuracies, but it should be things that are eventually fixable. K's also posted that they were going to be making a video on it soon and thought it was an overall cool product, but didn't like the marketing, which is basically how I describe every Analogue product. I actually liked every one of them. I just never really liked the way that they were presented to the public because I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it was lies and deceitful, but that whole, an effing symphony 100% compatibility thing, that was just hilarious. But yeah, I'm still going to do a live stream on it. I have a lot going on, so I might not get to that for a couple of weeks. So hopefully we'll see another firmware update from Analogue, maybe with DAC support, maybe delivered by Santa from the Cheese Moon. I don't know. The LNH team has just released the first ever open source flashcard for the Nintendo DS or DSi, and it's based off of the RP2040, so a Raspberry Pi chip. I don't think anybody has them for sale yet, but we'll obviously update you if anybody is selling them, and I think this is absolutely awesome. Now, of course, there are already cheap DS flashcards out there that work fine, but I think that having stuff like this open source is really a necessity for long-term preservation. I see both sides. Obviously, if you make a product and you're trying to recoup some of your costs at least, or try to make a living, you have to sell it, and keeping it closed source, I get it. I don't shame anybody for doing that or any company for doing that. But in order for this stuff to really just stand the test of time, it needs to be open source and accessible. So having these ROM carts available, flash carts, whatever, I think this is going to be a good idea for the long term. In the short term, it might actually be cheaper just to get one of the existing ones, but I'm still a huge fan of it, and I think it's very cool to see what could come of it. Also, the fact that it's open source might lead to a few other things in the future. And of course, the one thing that I would love to see, which is probably impossible, is a true 3DS flash cart, ROM cart, whatever. Because sometimes just having to get in and deal with the soft modding is a pain, especially if you've taken the time to do it and then something happens, years go by, and you try to access that again, and you forgot what you did in the first place. You forgot what you need to do. Do you need to re-soft mod it? Do you have to just boot it in a certain thing? It can get confusing for people that have a lot of different consoles and handhelds and just don't play that one too often. Whereas just using a flash cart, drop your ROMs on the SD and go from there. So I don't think that's possible. And I remember having a conversation with somebody years ago, a developer, about why it's not possible. But who knows? If it ever would happen, I bet you it would happen because of an open source project with a group of contributors. But who knows? Please correct me on this one. I'm going all by memory on the 3DS stuff, so I could have completely just, stuck my foot in my mouth, which is fine. Go ahead and tease me for it if I did. But yeah, it's still back to the point. I think this is a cool project. I'm really happy to see it. And if anybody has built their own just to test one out, please let me know in the comments and tell me what you think. Mike Chi just released a very cool firmware update for the RetroTink 4K, both the CE and the Pro, that allows for a 3840 by 1080 at 120 output. So essentially, it's 4K resolution on the horizontal side, but still 1080p height. And then your TV has to then figure out what it is and stretch it properly. I tested it both on my LG OLED, the C4 that I did the video on, and the LG IPS screen that I ended up keeping, and both worked perfectly in this mode. And the purpose for it would be to allow you to get the same horizontal detail that you would get in 4K, which if you're using Aperture Grill CRT masks, that's a big deal, but also access BFI at 120 hertz. So for displays like the C4 OLED that's maxed out at 144 hertz, this is a very, very cool thing to try. You're not going to notice any difference or much difference if you use slot mask-based CRT emulation, but for any of the Trinitron stuff, you will notice a difference, and it's definitely worth trying. This was added with help from Mark from Blurbusters, who hopefully I'll be talking about the new Blurbuster stuff next week. And also Tim Lotties, I'm sorry, Tim, I'm always getting your name wrong, assisted with adding energy conservation scan lines, which is essentially a way to generate CRT mask emulation that is just as accurate as before, and in some ways a little more. I'll talk about that in a second. However, it doesn't dim the image. So that means you get good performance just with standard SDR. You don't need to enable HDR, which is important because a lot of displays don't get it right or don't get the HDR mode right or whatever else. If you want to try this out, it's an experimental firmware, but that doesn't mean anything. You could always go from one firmware to another. The only reason Mike even calls these experimental is because it's just a polite way of saying, hey, this is still in progress. So if any of these new features don't work exactly the way you hope, this is just for you to play with until it all gets worked out. But there's no risk. There's no warranty void. You could switch between them at all times. It's all super easy. And in this package comes with a couple of profiles. So to try this out, you would want to have the same exact mode line, and you want to copy it to the first custom one text file just to make it easier. Copy the profiles to your profile directory and fire it up. And it looks very cool. It's definitely something where, you would notice a difference with the Trinitron mask. In this profile, you're going to need to make a couple of changes, though. First, and obviously, set it to an even integer. So you want to go into the scaling menu and set it to 5x, like I always recommend. And then also enable the vertical CRT mask. Maybe even darken it up a little bit, too. Anybody who's used this stuff before, this is super easy. Sounds like I'm explaining a lot of things, but this is a couple of seconds worth of work. Then, set your input, save the profile. And I would also suggest doing the same thing with the HDR version of the same profile, because I think if you were really curious, if you're a nerd like many of us are, you'd want to see the difference. And adding HDR it makes it look worse. because there's no need to. That's how cool these new scan lines that Tim helped out on are. And it's awesome to see, because this really gets one step closer to true CRT emulation. There's a few more things to note. If you're using an IPS screen, having it in an even BFI, like, from 60 to 120, you're going to get image retention. Don't use it. I think I had it on, testing it on this display for like 2 minutes, and then I switched back over. And when I opened up Discord, there was still the picture of the 240p test screen, burned in, temporarily. And it just went away in a couple of minutes. However, I did use this profile to get the new scan lines, the new energy conservation CRT mask emulation with a 1080p 180 mode. So essentially, I did the same thing that I talked about in the IPS versus OLED video, except I set it with these new scan lines, and it looked incredible, and there was no image retention for the reasons I explained in that one. So I definitely wanted to put that out there. This will not run in 3840 by 1080 and 180 at 180 hertz. That's not possible. 120 is absolute, really the max for this. So I just wanted to put that out there for non-OLED users. You could still use the scan lines, but I would kind of go in and make sure that you tried it in 180 hertz, which means you need a 240 hertz display. But for any OLED owners, including just 120 hertz one, this is a must try for you, because it might end up looking much better than all of the other alternatives. And it was really easy to just to get all this stuff working. The full list of changes is right here. And Wobbling Pixels also posted standard scan lines versus these. And if you, click on that picture on your PC and zoom in, they actually look more defined. I mean, it looks more like you would expect from a quality CRT. So it's not just that you get the brightness boost. They kind of looked better. So this is cool. Also, Tim did a video all about what this is, which if you're a fellow nerd, I suggest watching it. I got halfway through and I got to find the time to finish it, but cool stuff. So yeah, to swing back to the beginning, basically this is just a cool way to get sort of 4K 120 out of the RetroTink 4K. That's not for everybody. If you're using a 240 hertz IPS, still use the other methods I talked about. If you don't care about BFI at all, then you don't need this. But the scan lines definitely are something you should try out. So links to everything are right here. Thanks so much to Mike, Mark, and Tim for working on all of this stuff and just giving us an amazing free update to a product that was already amazing as it was. So very cool stuff. And if you're a RetroTink 4K owner, you should be very happy right now. A Kickstarter campaign was just successfully funded for a Mega Man style game for both the Neo Geo and Genesis, as well as Steam versions. The game is called Metal Mac, and the versions of the game are going to be tailored to either of those consoles. And the team is pushing to have it run as best as it can on both, which means they're going to be two slightly different versions, and the Steam version will come with both of those. Steam version ranges between $15 to $50. The Genesis is $65 to $95, and that's the physical cartridge. And the MVS and AES versions would range between $325 and $400, depending if you want regular or deluxe editions. But keep in mind that the target release date is 2027, spring, summer, so a year and a half away. But there's a couple of things to get really excited about this. First, and one thing that I always truly appreciate, if you get the Steam version, you get the ROM with it legally, which means if you already own a Neo Geo or Genesis ROM cart, you could just play them that way, which I think is excellent, because so many of us just don't have the space or the budget to buy all of these things, but still want to support the creators and experience them. Also, they're going to have the soundtrack is going to be contributed by game music legends Alistair Brimble and Chris Hulsbeck, which is very cool because you get two awesome musicians adding very cool soundtracks to this. So the potential right there alone for it to be worth buying is cool. But it's my job to highlight all of the positive and all of the concerns for something like this. And a mid-2027 release date, that's a long way away. That's the type of release date where if I backed this right now, I might forget this even existed by the time this thing comes out. And on top of that, does that mean the game's not done? And how much more needs to get completed? We've all seen projects from reputable developers, not just newcomers who don't know what they're doing, who give a target release date for a game that barely is even made, and they just blow right past it, or it never gets released. Remember 90s Arcade Racer and some of the many others that just never came about. So I don't know. I think that if you're looking for a Mega Man style game on those platforms, this is a pretty cool thing, and it might be worth the wait and worth investing in. But I just always want to bring up the whole, this is a long way away and this is a risk. Now, maybe it's just that the development team doesn't want to hit any bumps in the road and disappoint people. So maybe they just set really far out release dates, knowing that it'll probably be done before that anyway, which is cool. It's not it's not a bad thing to do, but it's my job to warn everybody as well as hype it, because I think it looks awesome. So check out the trailer if you're interested. Check out links to everything else. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what the finished product looks like. Couple of quick reviews this week. First is just the tall drafting chair. I had the one that a couple weeks ago that I didn't like the seat. It kind of hurt my back because it was too firm. So I just rebought the one that I had that fell apart after a couple of years, and it's awesome. This is still my favorite chair, and I wanted to bring it up again, not just to talk about the review, but just to remind people the little trick that I did saved me a ton of money and effort. I have a basic IKEA desk that I had extended to standing height. It was a cheap desk, but it's perfect for, at least for my height, for standing and working. But I have a hard time standing and writing scripts. I don't know, maybe I'm not smart enough to do both at the same time. So I like to sit for that. So the choice is to buy an expensive standing desk that raises and lowers. And then all of the wires of all of the crazy stuff I have plugged into my setup also have to be routed in a way where it could raise and lower. Or I just keep the desk stationary and buy a really tall chair that could also lower down to normal height if I need to. So that's why I wanted to talk about this again, because that saved me a ton of money, a lot of effort, and it works perfect for my setup. So I really just wanted to share it again because of that. And also now you have two choices. If your butt prefers a nice soft cushion, get this one. If you like the more firm cushion, get the other one. And I guess there was one more chair that I missed that I probably should have tried. So if I ever need a second, you'll have to deal with another one of these videos. But yep, just wanted to share it. And now for my ridiculous review of the week. I reviewed a shoe rack. And honestly, the review itself isn't funny, but just the fact that I would do it, I think, is hilarious. But the craziest thing is, after I put the video out, somebody said they use almost the same identical one for their consoles, because they needed the same thing. They needed narrow storage to fit in a smaller space. So they have their consoles mounted this way, and they're able to flip it down, and that's how they access each of their consoles. So I just did the review because I thought it was funny that, Bob from RetroRGB was reviewing a shoe rack he got for his wife, but you actually can apparently apply this to retro gaming as well. I love it, and I'm really having so much fun doing these silly reviews, and they take up so little time, and it just cracks me up. So yeah, if you want a shoe rack / alternative game console storage that flips out, check this one out. Couple of quick things before I go. First, that other FPGA-based N64 console was announced, but they took a page out of Analogue's book and did an announcement for an announcement without price or details or a release date, so I didn't bother to write a post on nothing. I don't really want to talk about nothing until there's something to talk about, so I'll get to that eventually. Also, I do have tech-related short reviews coming next week, stuff that most of us might at least want to know exists. I'm not going to just be doing shoe racks and chairs, but that's kind of the point of the second channel. Is I'm going to review anything I want, including the most ridiculous stuff, and I think I'm purposely going to do some really funny and silly ones just because I like to make myself and other people laugh, for anybody that shares the same very weird sense of humor I have. But anyway, as always, thank you to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to people who support in any way at all, because it truly is you who's keeping all this stuff going. So thank you all so much. I'm sorry for talking so long about butt wipes, and I'll see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.